We are very honored to host Mr. Hani. He's a very busy man. He has a very busy schedule. But despite his many activities, he was able to squeeze in some time to come here and share with us his expectations about Kuwait energy in the future. Mr. Hani is a graduate from the University of Oklahoma, Tulsa, Oklahoma. He graduated in 1971. And Dr. Ibrahim graduated in 1991. So both of them are alumni from the same university, although there's a gap of years. So we have two alumni from the University of Oklahoma. Mr. Hani was the former deputy chairman and chief executive officer of Kuwait Petroleum Corporation. He is currently the Secretary General of the Compensations Committee. Now, during the invasion of Kuwait, many people lost a lot of property, and after the liberation, the government formed a committee to compensate those people who lost their belongings. So Hani is the chairman of that committee. If you happen to be here during that time and you lost property, maybe you can talk to him after the lecture. So without wasting your time, I'd like to invite Mr. Hani to come and share with us his ideas about the future of energy in Kuwait.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum. I'm very glad to be here, and I'd like to thank you all and Dr. Ibrahim, Mr. Hassan, for inviting me. I graduated, as you know, 20 years earlier than Ibrahim, but I must assure you I am not 20 years wiser than him. Before I start, I would like to express my admiration, really, and appreciation for the Aware Center and what they're doing in here. I think it's an honorable endeavor to bring close together the peoples from the West and the East to understand each other, to appreciate each other, and to understand the culture. We know that from our personal experiences, because when we went to the United States to study, we had similar groups that helped us merge and understand the American culture. And boy, at that time, I'm talking about the 60s and the 70s, we really didn't know much about the country and the culture. So we appreciated the efforts of the people who helped us understand and interact with the society in America. And I hope, as and when all of you go back to your countries, you think of Kuwait as more than just a station in the career or the job, but more of an emotional experience. Going back to the subject of energy and oil and its future, I'm not going to be talking for a long time, and I think we should leave space for your comments, your questions, and your views and ideas. But as you all know, energy in general is extremely important. It's extremely important for the world, of course. We need it to heat and cool the weather, to cool the weather in Kuwait, to heat the weather from where you came from. We need it to run the factories. We need it to generate electricity. We need it to run the cars, the airplanes, the trains. And for Kuwait in particular, energy and oil is very important. As you probably know, more than 95% of the revenue of the country comes from oil. That's not the way it used to be. I don't know how much you know about Kuwait, but Kuwait is a relatively new country, but it existed for about 260, 270 years. And before 70 years ago, of course, there was no oil. We used to depend mainly on the sea. I always thought that it was very interesting to note that Kuwait was established formally in about the year 1750, 1752. And the first ruler was Sabah al-Awwal. He passed away in 1776, which is the year of the Declaration of Independence of the United States of America. So we are about 25 years older than the United States of America. How did Kuwait exist? Basically, the economy had two pillars, pearls and trade, and they all came from the sea. Fishing for pearls was an activity that was taken in the months of the summer, where many dhows would go, and the people would go bring the oysters, and then the merchant class would market that oil all over, those fairs all over the world. It was successful, as such a thing can be successful, and it helped the economy of the community at that time. But in the 1920s and 1930s, as you may know, Mr. Nikomoto of Japan, a man whom I admire a lot but do not love at all, he discovered and actually patented the culture of the culture fairs, and the economy took a severe hit at that time. We're talking about the 20s and the 30s. The second pillar, of course, was the trade, and again, Kuwaitis used dhows to go all over the world as they knew it. The eastern shores of Africa and many countries in Asia. Singapore, Malaysia, India, Pakistan. As a matter of fact, we had families from the rich merchant families that had offices and had some of their members living in these countries. Before I go into how and when oil was discovered in Kuwait, let me just put it in the context of the world. How much energy and how much oil does the world need? And since we're going to be talking a lot about the future, how much in the future is energy going to be needed? We consume about 240 million barrels a day of oil equivalent. That is the energy in total. That energy comes, of course, from oil, from gas, from coal. These are the three main components, as well as from other sources of energy like the nuclear and hydro, which supply smaller amounts of energy. How much are we going to need in the future? Much, much more, about 355 million. So you have a huge increase in the amount of energy that is needed. What is the oil portion of that? And today, the world consumes about 90 million barrels a day. That's expected to increase by about 20 million in 25 years' time to about 110 million. So energy going from 240 million to 355 million in 25 years' time. Oil going from 90 to about 110 million. You keep hearing about solar energy, cleaner form of energy, renewable energy. These are extremely important. They are friendly towards the environment, but the base is very small. So they will continue to increase at a much faster pace than the others. But oil, thank heavens, is still going to be needed a lot. It's still going to be important. And even coal, which is the traditional fossil fuel, which is dirtier, if you will, than the other fuels, is going to be needed much more as time goes on. But as we look at the year, say 2035, about a quarter of a century from now, you have about, roughly, and I'm talking always in rough terms, you have about a third and a third and a third between oil, coal, and gas. That will continue to be the case. Oil as a percentage will drop to about 28%. Gas will go up to about 25%. Coal will go down to 28%. Why does gas go up? It is cleaner. It is desired all over the world. It is desired even in our region. But as I said, these make up about 75-80% of energy. They will make up about 75-80% of the energy even in 25 years time. Where does OPEC fit in? OPEC, as if some of you do not know, is a group of countries that export oil. OPEC stands for Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, and it was an organization that was established in 1961. Kuwait, by the way, was one of the founding members, and it now supplies about 30 million. So out of the 90 million barrels a day, 30 million come from OPEC. That will increase in 25 years' time to about 40 million. So it will also remain an important organization. Particularly that in these countries, it's unlike, for instance, the United States or to a large extent Russia. These countries produce and export a lot of oil. Many other countries produce a lot of oil like also the United Kingdom, but they utilize or use most of it. Is there enough oil to handle that demand in the future? The answer is yes. There's about 1,400 billion barrels of oil all over the world. That is recoverable oil, as they call it in the industry. So that should be enough for about 42, 43, 45 years of time. But at the same time, if any of you are familiar with the oil industry, with the improvement in technology, more and more reserves are found, and more reserves are recoverable, because the advance in technology in this industry has been tremendous. I have seen that in my lifetime, and I'm sure it will continue. One more point before we go particularly about Kuwait. When we talk about the oil industry, we generally talk about two sections. One section we call the upstream. The upstream is the part where you prospect for oil and you produce it as a raw material. The second part is what we call the downstream. The downstream is after you have taken it as a raw material, what do you do with it? You refine it, you transport it, you market it, you use it in its final usage, or you use it in the petrochemical industry to produce a whole lot of things that we can talk about a little bit later. In the 50s, in the 40s, the 50s, and parts of the 60s, the oil was dominated by 7 major oil companies. That has changed now, but these 7 companies, which were called the 7 Sisters, were 5 of them were American, 2 of them were English, or not to disappoint some of my friends here, the shell is actually Anglo-Dutch. So these were the companies that dominated the oil scene. These were the companies that made, more or less, made all of the deals. These were the companies that found the oil, made agreements with countries, marketed the oil, and actually they had hundreds of thousands of employees. In Kuwait, in the 30s, 2 of these companies, BP and Gulf being American, BP being English, and as you probably know, Kuwait was an English protectorate, but the United States, to be frank, did not want the United Kingdom or Great Britain to be the sole operator in here, because they saw that there are good prospects in Kuwait. So they formed a joint venture which became known as Kuwait Oil Company, and they made a deal with Kuwait in the standard format at the time, which was called a concession agreement, where they would produce the oil, they market it, and they would give a fee to Kuwait. That was in 1936, where the first oil well was drilled and oil was found in Kuwait. A little bit later, World War II came, so everything stopped. And in 1946, the first shipment of oil was made from Kuwait, because there was no activity during World War II. And then, as oil flew from Kuwait reserves, from Kuwait fields, the country was transformed. It was transformed in a huge way. Since he said when I graduated, so you can guess my age. In the 50s, I was a child, and I saw how the country has changed tremendously. I mean, you could not even believe it. This here was basically a small community, fairly poor. There were some, of course, as I said, merchant families, some rich people, but the means were extremely limited. And I must say, there were very well run ways in which the income was distributed and was spent to benefit the country. There was a big transformation in the education field, in the health services, in the infrastructure, on the roads, in the buildings, and in educating Kuwaitis abroad. And as a matter of fact, me and many other people, of course, were the beneficiaries of those policies. In the 60s, the early 60s, as the country began to change and as the country began to produce more oil and become more wealthy, the government, along with the private sector, formed many companies to work in the downstream side of the business. KNPC, Kuwait National Petroleum Company, was formed to refine the oil and to service the local market. KOTC, a transportation company, was also formed to buy tankers, oil tankers, product tankers, and ship the oil products and the oil all around the world. PIC, Petrochemical Industries Company, was also formed. These were formed, some of them in joint venture, as joint ventures with the major oil companies, some of them between the government and the private sector. This was really in line with what many other countries do. Then came the 1970s, and again in line with what has happened all over the world in the countries that produce oil, the government took over the oil industry in Kuwait. These companies then were taken over by Kuwait, and in 1980 a very important step was taken where the government formed what is called Kuwait Petroleum Corporation, which is the national oil company. It became the umbrella organization or corporation that owned all of these companies. So now you have a structure where you have a big corporation, Kuwait Petroleum Corporation. It oversees all of the oil industry in Kuwait, but it owns the companies that do the different activity. It owns KOC, which produces the oil. It owns KNPC, which refines the oil. It owns KOTC, which transport the oil and the products, and it owns the Petrochemical Industries Company. And it was during that period, the 70s and the 80s, where the producing countries became more or less liberated from these seven sisters or major oil companies. But the major oil companies still play and still do play now an important part in the oil industry, because I must say, and I have all admiration for them, they have been able to transform themselves to be able to be on top of the technology and the management of the oil industry, so they have become indispensable players in the energy and the oil scene. In 1983 and 85, the Kuwait Petroleum Corporation began to expand by buying downstream marketing facilities all across the world, and particularly in Europe. I don't know whether some of you know the Q8 brand, which is a brand of about 5,000, 6,000 gasoline stations all across Western Europe. They are present in about 30 to 40 airports, as well as many diesel stations and many refineries. And in 1985-87, Kuwait Petroleum Corporation started a huge investment program, both in producing oil and making the refineries more modern and more sophisticated. The crude oil produced by Kuwait is not very good. It's a little bit heavy and it's a little bit sour. When we talk about sour, that means it has contaminants, particularly sulfur. So Kuwait took a decision to have a lot of money spent on refining so that it produces very good products that meet the requirements of the environment worldwide. In 1990, as you probably know, Kuwait was invaded by Iraq, and at the end of the invasion there were 700 plus of wells and fire, and the oil industry faced a huge task of number one, extinguishing all these fires. Number two, recovering the operations both in the upstream and in the downstream. And that took a huge effort, of course, in 1991, 92, and 93. In 94, Kuwait took the major step of joining in a joint venture a big petrochemical industry here with what was Union Carbide, what is now Dow, and I think we are all very proud of our joint venture with Dow in Kuwait. The plant is very well run and it's extremely profitable and beneficial for both of us and Dow. What are the challenges in front of us now that I have given the historical and present perspective of the oil industry in Kuwait? Well, the oil industry in Kuwait is in the unenviable position of having to make sure that there is a steady and maximized revenue coming to the country. Because the economy depends on the oil industry, it depends on KBC. So they do that by trying to diversify the source of income. Sell crude oil as crude oil, refine a lot of it and sell it as products. Be present in the downstream in many countries where you can reach the final consumer, the people who go to the gasoline stations, who go to the diesel stations, to the airports, etc. They also have a big challenge because they are always under the microscope because of the accident. And our industry, if some of you do not know, is actually very dangerous and it's accident prone. And usually the environment people are not very happy with the oil industry. And it's a very tricky part to play, both in terms of public relations PR and both also in terms of technically being able to limit or to eliminate the pollution that comes from our operations. Of course, the oil industry here is also asked to support the economy, to support the private companies and be seen as a big player in having a vital economy. And no matter what you do, you'll still be taken to task to be able to do your part in that. So usually there is a lot of focus on the industry and how it's doing and what it's doing and whether it's doing enough for the community in general. Talking a little bit in numbers, where does Kuwait want to be in the future? It wants to remain a big player in OPEC and in the world as a big producer. Kuwait produces about 3 million barrels a day now. There is, of course, a huge amount of reserves. The reserves are around 100 billion barrels, so they should be. Anyway, there should be enough for me, my children, and my grandchildren. That's the extent to which we're worried about. But for 50, 60, 70 years, the oil will be here for sure. Kuwait has plans to increase the production from 3 million barrels a day to about 4 million barrels a day by the year 2030. In the refining part, Kuwait wants to increase its refining capacity so that not all of the oil is sold as a crude oil. So they have a plan to have about 1.5 million barrels a day of refining capacity. There is a huge refinery that's planned to be built. It's called the fourth refinery project. And it has the other advantage of being able to take the dirtier crudes and change them into environmentally friendly products. Kuwait is a little bit late in the petrochemical industry if it is compared to our neighboring countries like Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates or Qatar. So they plan to have more plants in here and probably to make some investments abroad. The petrochemical industry, by the way, is the part that produces just about everything that we see in life. That the material produced from the petrochemical industry are things that go into the production of clothes, plastics in all their forms, bags, nylon bags, medicine, and many other projects. At the same time, Kuwait has plans and actually started implementing some of them of buying a lot more product and crude tankers. This has two advantages. Number one, the obvious one, of course, is the economical advantage, but the more important one is the strategic advantage. You want to be able to have ships under your own control, because as you know, the Gulf area is really, well, it's not the safest place in the world, and there are always many things that happened. And I remember in the late 80s, and during the Iraqi-Irani war, we had a lot of tankers refused to come to this area because of the hostilities. And actually, if we did not have our tankers under our own ownership and our own control, the production and the export would have gone down a lot. So that is again a very strategic and important part. In the investments downstream, when I talked about the increase of energy requirement, the increase of oil requirements, more or less all of it is going to happen in the east. The energy requirement in the oil requirement in the west, in Europe, in Western Europe, United States, is going to be stagnant. That's because their economies have changed. They are going more and more into the sort of service economy, and also they are consuming a lot more now per person than in the East. Also, the East is developing much faster, and they are developing in the manufacturing sector. So most of the increase in the demand for energy, for oil, is going to come in places like China, India, many other economies in the East, Indonesia, Malaysia, as well as, of course, parts of Africa and South America. So Kuwait is planning to participate with Sinopec, which is a big oil company in China, in a huge refining and petrochemical complex, and they are in advanced talks also with Vietnam, which is another vibrant economy, about also building a refinery. When you join in a refinery project in some of these countries, you have two advantages. One of them, of course, again, the economy, where you reap the benefits from the return on investment, although the refining business is a very tough business to make money in. And the other part, of course, is it's a home for your crude. You lock in a customer that will, for 30, 40 years, take the Kuwaiti crude oil, which is something that's very important. That is really the general picture about the oil industry, about Kuwait, and there's of course not enough time for me to talk about many other things, because the oil industry is big, it's huge, it's complex, but I think I prefer to leave the chance for you to tell me what is it that interests you and what are your comments. Thank you.
We have 20 minutes to take questions, so one person can ask a question at a time. So please introduce yourself, telling us your name and where you work, and one question, because many people would like to ask as well.
Thank you, Dr. Hani. It's a very nice lecture. Actually, I know from your lecture that Kuwait will remain 60 to 70 years. I heard something else that's maximum 40 to 50 years. I hope it will remain more than 100 years. But at the end, one day it will finish. What's the plan for the Kuwaiti government? By the way, I forget to introduce myself. My name is Tariq Mufti. I'm an architect and ex-consultant for the Council of Ministers of Kuwait for the mega projects. I used to work with Failaka Island and Bubian Island and Port. What's the government's plan to do and replace this kind of energy, whether let's say solar energy or tidal energy or wind farm and so on? Thank you.
As a citizen of Kuwait, this is really a very painful question, because to be frank and honest with you, when as I said, when I graduated in 1971-72, that point was raised, And to a large extent, it's unfortunate when oil becomes high in price, because people here tend to be complacent. You know, in the year we are in, you know how much extra revenue we have in our budget over and above the requirements? It's about 8 to 9 billion dinars. When these things happen, policymakers unfortunately do not take enough steps. What you were saying is what I've heard in 1977 when I graduated. They were saying we want Kuwait to be less dependent on oil. As an oil mine, or the next oil mine, this was not my job. It's the job, of course, of the government and the policy makers. Part of the question, part of the answer, in my view, is to have a bigger presence in the petrochemical industry. So you are going from just depending on it as an energy source, but you have a manufacturing and marketing strength in an arena that could be very successful in helping the economy of the country. The other part, which is other parts of the economy, if you know, to have an economy that relies on trade or finance, it has not improved to a degree that is acceptable in my mind. As for whether Kuwait has any activities in other forms of energy, I must admit, I think Kuwait is at fault there. Other countries, in particular United Arab Emirates, do actually a lot more.
How are you? That was a wonderful speech. My name is Vincenzo Hoja. I'm a student at Kuwait University. My question is this. Does Kuwait, besides petroleum, does it produce natural gas as well? Because I've heard my friend, for example, he told me that it produces more natural gas in Qatar, but it doesn't export their natural gas. It doesn't use it because if it would lower the Qatarian export of the natural gas. Is that true, or is this a rumor?
That's a very good point. As I said earlier, gas as a form of energy is much more desired because it's cleaner. And the problem with gas, of course, is how do you transport it? Gas is produced in two forms, by the way. What we call in the industry associated gas, which is the gas that comes with the oil as you produce it. You produce oil and gas comes with it, and you separate them, and then you use the gas for its different uses. And then there is the natural gas that gets produced by itself. Now Kuwait has, of course, associated gas that comes with this oil, and very, very little non-associated gas which comes on its own. What we have is far below our need. As a matter of fact, Kuwait imports gas in the summer period because, unlike Europe, we are the reverse of Europe. In the electricity consumption in Kuwait in the summer is about 70% higher than average. So during that period, we import gas. Actually, Kuwait had a plan to bring gas by pipeline from Qatar, because Qatar is a huge producer and exporter of gas, and we wanted to do that, but politics got into the way. We weren't able to. So we would like to, and as Shell, by the way, is helping Kuwait in trying to produce more gas. But even when we produce more, which is expected, maybe the numbers don't mean much to you, it's about 1 billion standard cubic feet per day, go to 2 billion. That will not be enough for us.
So, my name is Stephen Mustafa. I'm an electronics engineer by education. I'm actually a computer engineer here by trade. I'm a senior consultant with DR United, and I work primarily in the legal sector. I have a two-fold question, if you don't mind. First of all, I enjoyed this because I never really knew that Kuwait had such a, relatively speaking, long history. My first question is with regards to the distribution of oil in its crude form. You mentioned certain tankers, and through KOTC, that's obvious. Kuwait owns its own tankers. Is future distribution expected to go through tankers in itself, or is Kuwait actually planning on setting up some new pipelines in collaboration with its neighbors? That's the first question. The second question is with regards to future energy distribution. And primarily here I'm considering alternative energy, because Obviously, the infrastructure here is geared towards the distribution of gasoline and diesel and so on, which is not primarily what's considered alternative energy. And that's basically it. Are there any plans for improving the infrastructure? Have you heard of anything as such? And thank you.
The first part, one part of it for Kuwait is very important when you're talking about the pipeline. What we struggled with since the 1980s actually was what happens if God forbid something happened to the Hormuz Strait, and that's a problem that has flared up again recently. What Saudi Arabia did, as you probably know, Saudi Arabia has a lot of production in the east as well as in the west. They built a pipeline, which is called the East-West Pipeline, so that they can ship a lot of the oil from the Red Sea, thereby bypassing the Hormuz Strait. For us, that is the important question actually. What do we do in case something happened? And again, there were some plans, but they never materialized, frankly, for political reasons. Transporting oil, crude oil or products by oil tankers will remain very important, will remain an integral part of our policy and what we're going to do. The pipeline part, as I said, if it happens, is going to be done for strategic reasons. I remember in the late 80s, I worked personally on a project whereby we would import gas from Qatar or neighboring countries on land, and that pipeline would be used in emergencies to export our oil again to the Arabian Sea, bypassing the The second part of the question, I did not understand. What was it, or the second question, what was it that you wanted to know?
Currently, the infrastructure is based on the distribution of gasoline. I'm looking particularly at cars. Okay? Now, with the advent of electric-powered vehicles, you're looking for a different sort of station to power your vehicles and whatnot. Now, obviously, with the introduction of new forms of energy, including green energy of all sorts, one big obstacle is that the current infrastructure is not geared to the distribution of this energy. Are there any plans to resolve this?
Well, you're talking to me about to me as a general human being or as a Kuwaiti. we frankly, as Kuwaitis, we hope that oil remains a very important and integral part of the requirements of the world. And what we would like to do is to see ways, and the technology is there, to have the oil usage become more and more environmentally friendly. And in the gasoline for the cars, there are, as you probably know, the hybrid cars where you can use this and that, and inside the city the car can utilize electricity, and then when you go on the highway it can utilize gasoline. But if something like this happens, of course, it's not going to be Kuwait that starts it. But we haven't even, there's been always talk about the thing growing quicker. We haven't seen it yet. And as I said, oil will remain a big important part of the equation no matter what happens with the other forces.
Hello, good evening everyone. Great speech, thank you so much, and it's a pleasure to meet you. My name is Yolanda Cabrera. My company is Kenda Enterprises, which Kenda, by the way, is the original name for Kuwait in 6th century, when the region was called Kenda, so that name came in honor of Kuwait. My question is, I came in after I moved my car, so I overheard you mention public relations. I overheard you mention public relations and community involvement. This year, or just last year, I participated with Petroleum Industries Corporation for the beach cleanup and their initiatives for Earth Day. And I just wondered, do you have a larger initiative for corporate social responsibility? And if so, how do we get involved more? just to support what you're doing with the community.
But I was commenting on something. National oil companies, and this is true, national oil companies and what we call now the super majors are extremely wealthy, and their industry pollutes the atmosphere and it's accident prone. So they are expected to do much more, and sometimes even when they do things properly, the community is not convinced. That was what I was commenting on. So they should do more. Number one, to improve the safety for their employees and the others, not to hurt the environment, and because they are wealthy, they should serve the community. And the community should see that they are doing things far beyond their running their business as usual, because they are very capable because of their resources and the number of the people they have. That's essentially what I'm doing.
Dr. Hani, my name is Zara Rally. I'm a lawyer and I work for one of the prominent law firms here in Kuwait. And first, I'd just like to say what an honor it is to actually hear you speak and to meet you today. My question is a general one that draws on a lot of your experiences. Clearly, you're someone who's been in the oil and gas industry for a very long time, has a rich amount of experience and exposure. I'd like to know, in your opinion, what are the biggest challenges facing the oil and gas industry today?
Well, thank you for your question. And I think the challenge is, if we were talking about Kuwait in general, I think I went through the challenges. Kuwait Petroleum Corporation is expected to continue to provide revenue in a continuous manner and in a maximized manner to the country, no matter what happens. Things like political events or problems in the market, etc. Because the country depends on the oil for so much. At the same time, as I said, they are expected to do that in a safe manner and not to pollute the atmosphere and to serve the community. That's really parallels what is required from the oil industry in general. The oil industries have, in general, a big image problem, and that problem is to a certain extent deserved, because as I said, they operate in many regions of the world. They pollute the atmosphere. They have accidents. They are looked at as greedy, and you probably know that. I think it's Bolivia in South America is suing Chevron now for about, I don't know, what's 15 to 20 billion dollars. So that is a big challenge.
I just wanted to know if in the near future or soon, does Kuwait see any interest in investing in other developing countries that have recently discovered oil, like Ghana or Sudan or any other developing countries that have to help them produce and mass produce their oil? Does Kuwait have any interest in investing in that regard?
Well, the answer is yes. Of course, what I've talked about, on purpose, I made my speech very brief because there are many more details. One of the subsidiary companies of the Kuwait Petroleum Corporation is a company called KOFPIN, which is Kuwait Foreign Exploration and Production Company, which deals in exactly what you have talked about. It has interests in many countries all around the world, in Pakistan, in Tunisia, in Egypt, and in about 4 or 5 other Asian countries. What they do is twofold. Again, it's economics as well as helping these countries look for and produce oil. Actually, they run not a very big operation compared to the size of Kuwait Petroleum Corporation, but it's fairly successful and fairly profitable, and I think it's fairly helpful to the countries where they are in.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hani, for your inspiring speech, and thank you very much for attending. Before you much again.